Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are doing the after show for Dr. Henke and Dr. Loechelt on helium diffusion rates. For those who have not seen the first video, I think that you're really going to enjoy it. It was an amazing presentation, amazing discussion. However, we didn't really get a chance to go into everything, and there's a couple things that we missed, and I would like to get into them in this after show, as well as break it down to a little more layperson level, because the complexities of this topic are almost overwhelming. And I know a lot of people probably thought that a lot of it was over their heads. And it's, even though it's a lot of complexities, I think overall the summation of it, what the rate claims are, is kind of easy to understand. And we're going to have Dr. Loechelt talk about that in just a second. But well, actually, let's just dive into it, because one of the things we missed, and I really want to talk about it, was the fact that to explain some of these discrepancies, Dr. Humphreys and the rest of the rate project had posited something called accelerated nuclear decay, or accelerated decay. Looking into it myself and having a small background in nuclear physics, I have not yet seen any evidence whatsoever of any type of accelerated decay at all. I mean, there are things that will change decay rates, so things like what's called K capture or electron capture that'll do it. As I understand it, at high pressures, I think, can actually change the how things decay because of electron orbitals. But I have never seen anything that will change the amount of decay rate to get hundreds of millions of years worth of decay rate into 7,000 years. So I'm going to ask Dr. Loechelt now to kind of explain, one, what they're positing by accelerated decay and why they think that it exists. Because as far as I can see, they're only positing that it exists because it must exist, because it fits their paradigm and initial preconceptions and preconditions that the Earth is young. Other than that, I don't see any scientific evidence for it. And then we're going to kind of back it up a little bit and give a very basic overview of what the argument is for the helium diffusion rates. So with that, Dr. Loechelt, do you want to go ahead and address that real quick?
Yeah, so let's start with the paper in 1982 by Robert Gentry, because that really is the starting point for rate and this whole investigation. Basically, what Gentry found was they examined zircon crystals from various well-core samples from Fenton Hill, and they measured the helium content. And they published a paper basically just saying, we measured these zircons and there's this much helium in it. Didn't really go much beyond that. But sort of behind the scenes, Gentry was a young Earth creationist, and talking among his fellow young Earth creationists, they had the notion that, or the interpretation that they did not believe that it would be possible for the helium in these zircons to be retained for, let's say, 1 billion years. And the first question is, did the helium come from radioactive decay or not? And that's one of the things that Dr. Henke addressed. But let's, for the sake of argument, just say that yes, there's helium in the zircons, there's measured, so I think that is pretty certain. And let's say, for the sake of argument, it was the product of alpha decay of uranium and thorium in zircon, because zircon crystals have an affinity for uranium. That element incorporates very well in the crystal lattice. So it tends to have a higher radiogenic content than many of the surrounding minerals, which is why it's used quite often for radiometric dating. It just naturally lends itself to being more radioactive. So let's suppose that these crystals that had helium, that the helium primarily came from the decay, the alpha decay of the resident radioactive nuclei. Then the question is, how long could that helium remain in the crystal? Okay, so this was really the starting point of the rate study, and they wanted to put together a model to estimate how long the helium could remain. One of the mechanisms for loss is diffusion, and it's just the normal migration of atoms through a solid, and that's a very sensitive function of temperature. So what the rate team tried to do, they tried to put together a model for the helium diffusion, and they concluded that the amount of helium lost would take about 6,000 years for that to occur. So the helium could only be retained for about 6,000 years. And yet, supposedly, the zircons are 1.6 billion years old, or at least the rocks they came from, which should make that clarification, are that age. So their question was, how do you reconcile a helium diffusion age of 6,000 years compared to a traditional radiometric dating age of 1.6 billion years? And their answer was, well, if if uh, if the universe is young, then the 1.6 billion year age is suspect, but the 6,000 year diffusion age is not. So we believe the 6,000 year diffusion age. But in order to get the helium, the decay must have happened much faster in the past. Otherwise, there'd be no helium to begin with. So they were two things, really. Observation that helium's in the crystal, then an assertion that it would diffuse out of that crystal quickly, but that it came from radioactive decay. So therefore, the Earth is 6,000 years old and nuclear decay rates are accelerated. That's the nutshell of the argument.
And this is based upon a multiple step of the decay chain, like for example, like uranium-235. There's multiple alpha particles that are going to be emitted over a long period of time. I think it's 7 or 8, if I remember correctly, all the way down.
Eight for uranium-238, 7 for uranium-235, 6 for thorium-232.
Okay, so there is and that's basically what they have to account for about if the helium is still in the zircon crystals, if it's escaped. Yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
And then you run into the heat problem.
And then you run into a heat problem, which, go ahead. Why'd you go ahead and describe that? Because it's funny. I was just talking about the heat problem the other day, and I actually have had younger creationists say there's no heat problem, and I'm like trying to explain to them that even creationists admit there's a heat problem, and that is actually one of the major unanswered questions that they have, and they even admit that on ICR. They even say these are unanswered questions that we have in younger creationism, and the heat problem is a huge problem to overcome. So you want to address that real quick?
Well, I think that even Snelling admits that the amount of heat released in one flood year, if all of this decay occurred in one flood year, would have sent the Earth's surface to about 200 or about 20,000 degrees Kelvin, which is about 4 times the temperature of the surface of the sun. That's a problem. They try to come up with, I guess, volume expansion, and that doesn't work very well either, because if you try to expand the volume to get rid of the heat, then other parts of the universe, like Noah and the Ark, that don't have so much radioactive material in them, are going to be frozen. And so they really haven't solved the problem. They recognize the heat problem. To be exact, one of the things that killed their so-called vapor canopy was all the heat that would be released if it fell. I don't know if you're familiar with the vapor canopy idea.
Yes, the canopy theory, of course. Yeah, the amount of enthalpy in that system when that water comes crashing down would basically liquefy the crust of the Earth, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, and that was one of the reasons why a majority of young Earth creationists abandoned the vapor canopy. But somehow the heat problem is not taken as seriously for accelerated radioactive decay. This is basically the last card that they have to play on radioactive decay. They tried to come up with other ways of trying to get rid of radioactive radiometric dates, and it hasn't succeeded. And so they're putting basically all their eggs in this one basket and say that yes, the decay occurred, but it was accelerated either during Noah's flood or the creation week or both.
Yeah, and can you address real quick? I mean, if let's say hypothetically there was something called accelerated decay, all these natural units are intricately related to each other. You have the fine structure constant, you have Planck's constant, you have the gravitational constant. All these things are related. Speed of light, and so you start messing with one, starts messing with the other ones. Electromagnetic constants. So if there was something called accelerated decay and it did change the value of C, how would it affect all these other constants such that I don't even understand how you would even have atoms at that point.
I don't know, Gary.
I don't see how atoms would even come together.
Well, this is one of there's a lot of real, let's say, missing pieces to the whole rate argument. And let me add this. I would say it's one thing for them to say in 2005 when they published the rate book that we have these unanswered questions. It's 12 years later. How much progress have they made to resolving these questions? And that's another whole aspect for this whole accelerated nuclear decay hypothesis. In the last 12 years, they've made no progress identifying a mechanism. Until they have a mechanism down, we can't even begin to answer that question. They have made no attempt to quantify what the acceleration factor is so that you could actually go and test that hypothesis. So they've not attached a number to the rate. They give broad estimates, but they haven't actually attached a number. They have not identified a mechanism. And it's really hard for a scientific inquiry to proceed much further if they don't provide that answers to those basic questions. And it's been 12 years since they completed the rate study, and I've seen no progress on them refining their model.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I had asked, and welcome, Steve. Steve is your geology. I don't remember. Forgive me. Geology, Steve? Is that your thing?
Yeah, I'm a geologist. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But it's funny you mentioned that because I'd asked Dr. Humphreys about that, and I hate to say it, but everything he's ever given to me is self-referential. I really have never seen anything that he's pointed to that indicates any type of scientific evidence for accelerated decay. And I'm wondering if that's something that's been common that you've seen.
What I've noticed is he just keeps pointing back to his diagram where the
Exactly.
young Earth model supposedly lines up with his data.
Mm-hmm.
That's his only card that he has to play left. He seems to believe, okay, that's so definitive that if I made mistakes elsewhere, it doesn't make any difference. I got the final answer in the back of the book,
right?
Or whatever.
Yeah, you know what? I think wasn't it Dr. Henke the other day we were talking about that it is kind of like they're looking at the back of the book and saying, okay, here's the even questions, here's the answer. Let's make this work out to be that answer, even though they have shown no, as you said, mechanism or no methodology to explain how they even got there.
Yeah, that's 9th grade algebra.
Well, that's how I got through school, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We've all been there, done that, but no.
Yeah, the ninth grade algebra book always had either the odd or the even answers in the back.
Yeah.
And you just try to get the answers in the back of the book. Sometimes, however, the answers turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess for Dr. Humphreys, it's almost like the answers are in front of Genesis, and he thinks he's got the answers. Instead of maybe questioning his interpretations of Genesis, he's decided to just simply go with accelerated radioactive decay.
Well, if you actually,
in his diagram.
If you go to their sites, if you actually look at their mission statements, they make it very clear that there's no amount of scientific evidence that can change their presuppositions.
Yes,
that's right. Yeah,
which
they
is not
suppose. Yes,
and that's why when I hear that term creation science, it's very irks me because I don't see any science involved in creation science. I don't see how you have science in that. Now, I'm all for people to have their religious beliefs and their convictions. General Han Solo is a staunch Christian. He's one of my favorite advocates for Christianity, in fact. But he also recognizes science, and he will obviously be able to reconcile the two, which is fine. But he doesn't say, "Hey, I have a belief that comes first, and therefore I'm going to try to mold all the science around that." No, he looks at the science, and he's able to incorporate that into his religious beliefs, which I'm quite fine with, actually. Gentry, you want to mention that real quick? You want to talk about that if you don't mind? Or did you go AFK again?
Yeah, I mean, not to get too much into the theology, but I just, in a nutshell, I take into account that the God of the Bible encompasses this thing called the Logos, like, Jesus is called the Logos. So Jesus is all about seeking truths and modeling a perspective on reality that is not arbitrary, but intelligible. Then don't make stuff up. Have some form of integrity. So that's kind of like, I mean, I was an atheist before I became a Christian. And when I started to see that part of it, like that element in Christianity, that's what attracted me to the faith.
Yeah, and I have no dog. So I'm only interested, obviously, in the science, but
Yeah.
I like to respect people's individuality as far as their belief systems. I only really take umbrance when I see their belief system affecting secular systems. Like, for example, trying to teach creationism in school. That I just think is absurd. Teaching that evolution is debatable. That I think is absurd. Those are the things where I step in and go, okay, that's where we draw the line.
I would like to ask Dr. Henke a question, if you don't mind, on going back to that. Because in the background, I was hearing a talk, but then I had to go in and out. So I've been reading up on Humphrey's trueorigin.org. So I've read up on his 2005 response, and also I think a 2006.
That's correct.
Now, your 2010, which are PDFs, it's June 20th, 2010 revision. It's like 129 pages. Does that include your rebuttals on all of that?
Oh, yes, and also his 2008 and 2010 statements. After 2010, I let Gary take the lead in debating with Dr. Humphreys, and I should probably update my Talk Orchids essay. But yes, I responded to everything that Dr. Humphreys has mentioned and argued against me since 2010.
Okay, so and the 2008 one would be
well,
right.
There's a couple of papers. Yeah, there's a couple of papers that I think he put
on creation.com.
Yeah, they're listed at Talk Origins, and then also if you look at the slides that I posted, let me bring up the slides. I can tell you where they're at here in just a second. From the references.
Because one particular point that you made that I mentioned in the off-air briefly is the mistake he made with the equation 4, the Russian equation, exponential rather than base 10. Right. So what, did he address that at all?
Not really. Creation Wiki more or less did, trying to still argue that it's log base 10. But you see, I did not really get into that until my updates after. See, Dr. Humphreys apparently hasn't looked at my Talk Origins essay since 2006, and I addressed the issue of Megomendoff in more detail in 2010. Now, Dr. Humphreys' 2008 papers, one of them is in Creation Matters, which is just simply a small leaflet put out by the Creation Research Society every few months, and the other one is in let's see, it's on the I think the Creation Ministries International website, entitled "Helium Evidence for a Young Earth Continues to Confound Critics."
Yes, yep, that's yep.
Okay, and then the 2010 paper that I responded to was in the Journal of Creation, volume 24, number 1, page 14 through 16, and then after that, I let Gary take the lead in responding to Dr. Humphreys.
Okay. It's just, it just baffles my mind that, Anyway, go ahead, Steve.
It actually says on the Creation Wiki. I'm actually looking at it now. They say, so it would seem that the common logarithm is correct, and that 15 kilocalorie per mole activation energy is the result of the use of a best-fit line. And then they say that the result is that Humphreys was correct to switch from using the natural logarithm to common logarithm in interpreting Megomendoff's data. I still don't see how they're getting that.
Well, what they do is they connect Megomendoff's third point and his seventh point, and happen to get a value about 15 kilocalories per mole. But there's no reason to do that. I mean, you could take any pair out of the 7 data points in Megomendoff and get any value. But if you look at the intrinsic curve, it's about 15. It's about 17. But again, that's measuring it off a graph and photocopy and drafting and everything. So there's going to be a little bit of error there. And then if you look at the curve overall for all the data points in log base 10, it's about 20 instead of 15. So the only way to really get what's really going on is it is indeed natural log. And again, the lead data prove that. definitively. And neither Dr. Humphreys nor Creation Wiki address the lead data in Mega Mindoff and how it demonstrates that it was using natural log.
Yeah, I really hope Dr. Humphreys actually does address that, because I think that's one of the more critical errors that he seemed to have made.
Okay.
From a
Yeah,
very lay person's perspective, obviously, but
Right.
even I know enough math to go, something's just hanky with this, no pun intended.
Well, yes, but even if he admits, okay, let's say he admits, okay, it's natural logs, he's going to simply say, big deal.
Mhm.
And I would say, well, then okay, how do your dating equations square with the Mega-Mindoff data? These Mega-Mindoff zircons from the Ural Mountains cannot be 22 years old. And so he still has a problem here, even if he admits, okay, it is natural log.
So I mean, I looked at the graph, and I don't know really how to interpret the graph very well. When using the using the log base 10, it looks like there's a fit there, and then towards one side it just basically goes crazy. And you're saying that if you actually use the log base 10, you're going to get just such extremely off numbers, to the point where these zircons indicate like in decades ages.
Well, yeah. What had happened is that in the year 2000, Dr. Humphreys took the Mega-Mindoff data and plugged it into his dating equations and got a date of the zircons of 22 years. And then a few years later, another young Earth creationist by the name of, I think it's Ackridge or Ackerman, I can't remember, starts with A, said that the ages would be maybe a few hundred years. Well, the Ural Mountains are 250 to 300 million years old. The zircons are heavily damaged from radiation. So they're not. They did not form between the reigns of Ivan the Terrible and Joseph Stalin.
Now, did they assume that these were pristine? Like they had no radioactive damage to them? I mean,
No. Humphreys has an English translation of Mega-Mindoff, and in Mega-Mindoff it says that there's a lot of radiation damage to these zircons. Mega-Mindoff states that. Humphreys recognizes it.
okay.
But yet his equations say that the zircons are only 22 years old. So something I would say, instead of him trying to blame Mega-Mindoff, that he should look at his equations, that there's something wrong with his equations if they're saying that these highly altered zircons are only 22 years old, which from 1970 would mean that they formed in 1948, whatever.
And that doesn't even fit their narrative. That doesn't fit their paradigm anyways.
Right. And so that's a problem for them. And so even if Dr. Humphreys admits, okay, this is natural log, his problems are not solved yet.
I think also what. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you have finished.
No, go ahead.
I think Dr. Henke on slide 13 gives a pretty, powerful case in how to interpret Mega-Mindoff's equation. I mean, it's there's no other way to interpret it. But basically, the Harrison book in '99, page 144, you implement 2.303 into the equation.
That's right.
And so
That's a conversion factor.
Conversion factor. So
yes.
So that is indeed a natural log. It's not a base 10. So has Humphreys responded to that point?
He has not responded to any of this yet. I'm hoping he will.
I have sent him the link to that video. I've sent it to all of them, matter of fact. And I think I might have had the wrong email for Dr. Austin, although I remember contacting him before, but they gave the new one. So it is going out to all of them. Dr. Baumgartner is more than welcome to respond. He declined initially. There was a little bit of a correspondence issue there, but I think that's been resolved, and he's more than welcome to give his side. I would like their side. I mean, matter of fact, getting young Earth creationist PhDs to actually go on air to discuss their work is extremely difficult, if not nearly impossible. I don't think I've had one yet say they will do it, except for Dr. Jerry Bergman said he would. However, we haven't really worked out the details yet. I don't think he's familiar with G+, because every time we have, he just doesn't know how to get in the hangout, even I've worked with him. But other than that, they really don't want to go into a hangout where they're going to be challenged. And I've noticed that, and I see when it comes to like old Earth creationists or when it comes to actual scientists, they're more than willing to go over their data. They will defend their data, and I don't see Dr. Humphreys and them doing things on those lines. And I'm wondering, is that something that should be notable, that they're not defending their data the way they should be if they're going to promote these types of things as science?
Yes, I think that is notable, and if their goal is to win respect for their position in the wider non-believing community, their unwillingness to get outside of their camp does not help to that cause. Now, if their real motive is to keep people in their own camp, then maybe it does. So perhaps their things are more directed towards keeping the people in their camp than actually trying to persuade others, because not willing to engage in a dialogue does not improve their credibility. And I just want to point this out, realizing that I attempted the opposite. I tried to actually publish in their forums to get past their review process and publish things in their journals. And I can tell you, it is not easy. The Creation Research Society Quarterly, they basically drugged me out over a year, gave me sort of a mixed review. I asked if they would be willing to publish the paper at all. I basically said, if you're not willing to publish this paper, just tell me, and then we can stop. I will not work on revisions if there is no hope of publishing it in the end. And I was given an assurance that if I could meet the conditions of the original review, they would publish it. So I very carefully addressed all the concerns, added material to the paper to answer questions they had. I deleted stuff that they felt was inappropriate or that I thought wasn't necessary for my case anyway. And I was accommodating to them to quite a degree. And Eugene Chaffin, the section editor, kept dragging it out. He kept adding another requirement, another hurdle for me to cross. And eventually I got to the point where I was challenging him to defend the things that it came down to really debate on the thermal history, and I'll get into that next week. But he said my temperature, my interpretation of the thermal history was incorrect. And I asked him to then defend Humphreys in light of the references that were cited. He would not defend Humphreys, but he said that mine was unrealistic. And basically at that point, we just agreed that it's not going to be worth publishing. I mean,
which journal was this?
Huh?
Which journal was this?
The Creation Research Society Quarterly.
You did have something published in one of their journals, because I saw something.
Well, yeah, that was the Journal of Creation.
Journal of Creation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so different journal, and even there, it wasn't a full blown article. It was a letter, and if you look at what they require, a letter has to be 1,000 words or less, and it was very heavily edited. I mean, I had to, let's say delete some stuff just to get it past review, but at least it was somewhat reasonable. So I'm given 1,000 words in their form to make a case.
Wow.
Very
I noticed it was very succinct, and it did seem more like an open letter to them rather than, I mean, obviously it wasn't a technical presentation. You have a huge one out there. I think it's like 46 pages or something.
Yeah. I would not be able to get that published in the forum. And then Humphreys dismisses it because it's published online, and he says, well, it's not peer reviewed in an accepted journal.
Well,
so
his definition of peer review is not the same as ours, I think.
What's that? His
definition of peer review is not the same as how I use that word.
No, it's very different. So because really what he calls peer review, the rest of the world would call collusion.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually, unfortunately.
No, it is. It's exactly what it is. You have authors, the reviewers are pretty much his co-authors. It's not a true independent review. And
that is definitely something that should be noted. Again, we talk about creation science, in a true scientific forum, your paper and again, correct me as I'm wrong for a layperson's perspective, but your papers, they're supposed to be able to go in and attack it, and you defend it and see if you have the right methodology, your method section. And when you're doing these kind of works, you actually try to go out and try to falsify your hypothesis. You don't find evidence to support it. And the whole thing is, can people demonstrate that your findings are incorrect? They don't allow for that.
Yeah, that's about right. And you also never let your co-authors peer review. That's like a big no-no.
You just don't do it. It's bad form, right?
Well, yeah, you just don't.
Now, what if they're the only people that have such an expertise in that particular area?
Well, that might be a little.
That's a big problem, because there's only a small number of creationist physicists, PhDs, that could do the work. And we noticed, Chaffin was the editor at the Creation Research Society Quarterly for Gary's work. He was also on the rate committee with Humphreys, and so there's a conflict of interest there. But
Absolutely,
God don't have enough people to for both positions. You end up having conflicts of interest like that.
Yeah, no, I don't know how the creationist peer review works. I've had zero experience with it. I've actually always wondered. That's why I haven't been talking.
Well, not even the creationists like it. Back in 2007, a group of young Earth creationists attacked the Creation Research Society Quarterly for their phony peer review. I mean, it's an absolutely astonishing article. It's co-authored by a friend of mine who's a young Earth creationist. Just tore into how they peer review things and how they allow videos and references from obscure journals into papers and stuff. It's just, it's really interesting. The creationists, even creationists themselves, have problems with their own journals.
Well, I mean, when you have creationists having PhDs that start off with "Hi, my name is Ken Hovind," it's not surprising,
Oh yeah.
So, sorry, I had to get that in there. By the way, I do have Kent joining us on. I have Kent joining us on Sunday, so he is gracious enough to come join us on Sunday. He's been obviously, on my channel 5 times now. Even though I vehemently disagree with Ken Hovind on everything, he at least comes in and talks, and at least he'll at least put it on the line. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the credentials that I'm looking for people to come in and to give their reputation. So it doesn't really mean anything for him to, because he's not a real PhD. He did not even remote. He has like 2 years of community college.
Well, even the people like Creation Ministries International and Answers in Genesis don't like him. And
there's a lot of rift there.
Are bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of bad blood in between the members of that group, right? It used to be a kind of a clique, and then it kind of fractured over the years.
Yeah, the Australian version, Australian Answers in Genesis, broke up, divorced themselves from Ken Ham and the American group, and stuff. So they're now two separate ministries.
I can't get Ken Ham, unfortunately. I've been trying, because we have a person in our community, Paula Gia, who specializes in dealing with Ken Ham videos, and we've been trying to arrange something like that between them forever, and Ham just won't do it. I mean, it's pretty noticeable that he just avoids any kind of a situation where he has to actually discuss this in a group that's not surrounded by people that already agree with him.
Yeah, another thing that I notice is that quite often they will not cite, and certainly not link to websites for their opponents. I mean, I had to work really hard to get them to refer to my stuff.
Yeah.
I've had the same problem. Matter of fact, in the video we just did, I actually put the links to Humphrey's paper, or I hate calling it a paper because it's really not. I don't know what to call it, article, blog. I don't like using that word paper, but I put all the information in it. But like, for example, when I was moderating the debates with Ken Hovind, on his videos, he never put a link to my videos and anything, even though their tech guy said he would add it. They would add it. They never did.
No.
But Steve,
they did it now, but at the time they certainly didn't, which I was like, this is kind of dishonest. I'm putting links to Ken's channel on my channel, even though I'm really not a big fan of people going over to his channel, obviously. But I mean, it's fair play, but that I don't see it reciprocated.
Yeah, that's not unusual. I think it shows the lack of confidence they have in their own arguments, that they don't want them scrutinized.
Steve, you had a link to Humphrey's paper in that last hangout. I didn't notice that.
I did.
You?
Yeah, it was. I put what it was the paper was. Let's see here. Helium diffusion rate support accelerated nuclear decay. I had the PDF in there.
Okay. Okay.
I'm pretty. I'm,
Yeah, I want to see if his because I'm a stratigrapher, so I'm really interested in that part and to see because just from the hangout, I remember a slide there, with his random name, which totally violates the North American Stratigraphic Code in every way.
Yes.
And yeah, and I didn't see any lithology on his column, which is also like something you don't do when you name a rock unit. But I want to actually
Well,
look at it to make sure.
yeah, he thought it was granodiorite, and there is some granodiorite in there, but it's mostly gneiss.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I was watching that, and
yeah,
And
the
And just to make a point going forward, I will address that again next week when I talk about the thermal history. Because
and that does make a big
when you
difference.
misidentify the lithology that badly, it has all sorts of ramifications. And one is he misses, an understanding that in these Precambrian rocks, it has a very complex history. And
one of my big things I was wondering is, did that in that core was anything cross cut? Were there, what were the cross cutting relationships, if any? There, I don't.
yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
That was well described in the Laughlin paper, 1983. There were dikes feeding that layer of granodiorite. It really does look like a sill. There was a later intrusion that cut across that. So there are at least two igneous intrusions that cut across. One is the granodiorite, one that's after that. And it's well documented in Laughlin's paper.
And also some hydrothermal alteration.
Yes. And then you see that becomes important when we talk about Sasada, who did the fluid inclusion, and when the hydrothermal activity occurred, because Humphreys associates it with the eruption of the Valles caldera. And the more reasonable interpretation, and Laughlin supports this, is that there was a period of Precambrian hydrothermal alteration. And the fact that all of Sasada's samples came from the gneiss layers above the granodiorite is very interesting. But you see, Humphreys would have missed that whole connection because to him, it's all one homogeneous rock unit.
So so the clarification so people understand what we're talking about.
Sorry.
Well, my life gets lost easy. The granodiorite, that is igneous type rock, and the
That's right.
Gnesis is a metamorphic that was either igneous or sedimentary at one time that has been metamorphosized into a different types of rock. And
do we know if the Oh, sorry, Steve.
Real quick, basically there's a huge difference between the two as far as how you're going to have helium escaping them. Is that that kind of nutshell?
Well, it's far more complex. There's a lot of complexity involved in it. Yes.
Yeah.
But in a very simplistic way, you're dealing with very different types of rocks.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
And you see, for me, that my concern is the implication it has on the thermal history, because what it says is the layer of rock above the granodiorite had a different history than the granodiorite.
Do we know if the gneiss is of sedimentary origin, or can't that be determined? I mean, I don't know the grade of metamorphosis.
Well, there was a paper back in 1976, I think by Heimlich. He claimed that it was a paragneiss, that it was of sedimentary origin. But I looked at his arguments and I thought they were pretty weak. So, in my opinion, we don't know if they're orthogneiss, which would be of igneous origin, or paragneiss of sedimentary origin.
Because metamorphic can be either one, right?
Yes.
It could be the one.
Yeah, metamorphic.
I've said before, geology not my thing, so bear with me.
Yeah, but what we do know, this is from a broader geologic perspective, the dates of the gneiss layers is around 1.62 billion years, and that was from Brookings. And with the uncertainty of the data, it could be off a little bit. The entire Southwest was a convergent plate margin during that time. And I showed Steve and Kevin the pictures I took in Arizona, but a lot of that applies to that part of New Mexico. It's all the Mazatzal province. So basically, during that period of time, you had a convergent plate boundary. You had island arcs accreting to the continental margin and crunching up. And so that would form a lot of these gneiss layers. Some of it's sedimentary, some of it's igneous. Probably can't separate. Well, maybe you can, but I have not seen it separated out. And then after that had stabilized, there was a period of magmatic activity around 1.4 billion years ago, and you see granites and other things like that forming.
So it is the same type of, at least chronologically, the same type of igneous suites we see buried in Illinois and Wisconsin, then, with like the Wolf River and.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that. I've studied the Southwest, but I looked at some maps, and they divide the Southwest into different geological provinces. The Mazatzal is the one that I've personally looked at a lot in Arizona. It extends into northern New Mexico. So a lot of what I've seen and learned about in Arizona would likely apply to that. And it's this picture of, you have a period of convergent plate tectonics, crustal accretion, and then afterwards igneous activity intruding that.
I wonder if it's part of the same extension as it is up here, because it sounds very familiar, especially when you said 1.4 billion year alteration. Up here we have something called the Wolf River event that fits that time.
And where are you located?
I study the rocks around Lake Superior, usually the Upper Peninsula of Southern Ontario. So
okay, yeah,
that
pre-Cambrian.
Yeah, I guess, couldn't that be Archean? Or how old are they?
Stuff on the Canadian Shield is, but you got the Mid-Continental Rift there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes down into Nebraska, my home state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And down through Ohio as well.
Yeah.
And then Wisconsin's kind of like this mixed bag. So.
Yeah, I did my master's thesis on the Archean rocks up in northwest Ontario.
Right in or further north?
Above Patricia Lake. It's north of Dryden.
Yeah, Dryden. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry, I said Dryden.
Yeah,
cool.
And Kenora, north of Kenora as well. In greenstone granite belts.
Yeah, I've never seen the greenstones north of Wawa, Ontario.
Okay.
So just make sure we covered all bases. Was there any other thing that you guys can think of that we may have missed in the original video on this? I'm kind of looking over some of the main points that were some refutation against Rate and Humphrey's data, but I think some of the other ones that were brought up might be a little bit too complicated again. And I know we're not going to really get into like multi-domain versus like single domain stuff, but was there any other things that you can think that we can address that they might have made some mistakes on? Because there's a lot of stuff that I think they messed up on, but do you want to include anything on this particular video that we may have missed in the last one?
I don't have anything. I have to read the paper first.
I'm going through the criticism of Rate's helium diffusion data, and
I do have a question though, Steve, just in general.
Yes, please.
If you could get Dr. Austin on, that would be great, because I have 3 pages of criticisms of catastrophic plate tectonics that I would like to question.
I would love to get Dr. Austin on, especially with somebody like Dr. Fiona Robertson. She had actually written something in regards to his argon and argon potassium dating, and the way he treated the pyroclastic flow from Mount St. Helens, and things of that nature. So I would love to get him on to discuss those things. However, I don't see that happening. Yeah, although he has responded before, but
Dr. Baumgartner was the one that came up with catastrophic plate tectonics, I think. Well, Dr. Austin was also involved in that. There are actually young Earth creationists that oppose the idea, and they've got some interesting arguments as well. And it's a heat problem again. The catastrophic plate tectonics would basically melt the Earth.
Yeah,
and
do you know how Baumgartner hides the heat problem in his papers?
Magic?
No.
No, it's very it's very interesting, and it's not really highlighted. But if you read kind of the fine print, if you read through the papers in detail, he changes the thermal conductivity by a factor of about 1 million. No, more like 1 billion. And he doesn't say, yeah, that's wow. So I did the math. You could, if using his value of heat conductivity, you could take the energy of a nuclear power plant. I worked at a place in Hanford that was a 400 megawatt thermal reactor. So you could take that much heat dissipate it through a cubic meter of granite with only 1 degree temperature gradient from side to side.
Yeah, not going to happen. I mean,
Okay.
my reactors were only
Okay.
150 megawatt, and we would have a problem there too.
Yeah. So he increased the heat capacity, the thermal conductivity by a factor of 1 billion. And the second thing is he's not very explicit what his thermal boundary condition is. But if he used an isothermal boundary condition, and this is a question to ask, if he used an isothermal boundary condition, then basically that would suck all the heat out. Magically. And you could do it mathematically just by imposing an isothermal boundary condition and adjusting the thermal conductivity up. And you can get a model that works beautifully.
Yeah, I would
in a computer.
Carry Kim's apart. And by the way, people don't know what isothermal just means. You're changing temperature. There's no net change in temperature for people that
It's
are
a fixed temperature boundary.
Yeah.
It's a fixed temperature boundary. And under those conditions, it could basically absorb as much heat as possible because you're assuming an infinite heat.
You have an infinite heat sink. Yeah, I was going to say that would give you literally an infinite heat sink. Because
it is mathematically it's an infinite heat sink. And the thing is, if you had a real boundary condition, which means that heat's going into the atmosphere, it's not going to be. The atmosphere is not an infinite heat sink.
No, matter of fact, that's
not even close.
It's something we have in nuclear power. We definitely take into account the differential in temperature between your hot and cold legs is very critical, and you do not have an infinite heat sink, and it's based upon Carnot efficiency. Actually,
yes. So that's how he hides the heat problem in his models. He dials up the thermal conductivity, and I believe he uses a fixed temperature boundary, which gives him an infinite heat sink.
By the way, I just want to tell you guys, it's so nice to not talk about biology for a change, because that's kind of the big thing in
what's
biology. Yeah, I love biology, but I never get a chance to talk about physics that much. It's just very rare, except for like when General comes around.
Precambrian guys don't mess with that messy biology.
So this has been fantastic for me because I get to kind of remember stuff of what I had to learn, but I don't get to talk about very much because who really dives into these topics. So this has been incredible, and I do appreciate it immensely that both you gentlemen would come in and get your expertise on this, because this is just awesome for me. It really is.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, everybody. You could certainly email me at any time. My email address is on the title slide. And if anybody has questions or comments,
I have a bunch.
Okay, good. If you want to go now, you can. Or
yeah, I mean, I'll keep this open for a while. It's been 45 minutes, but I'll keep it open for a little while longer. And
yeah,
what do you think we can talk about polonium halos, which is another subject I really like?
Well, thanks for letting me on, Steve. I am going to go now. So,
you don't want to ask your questions?
Does anyone have anything for me? I mean, I know you guys don't know me, but
well, you might introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background.
All right. I'm Steve. I actually only have a bachelor's. I am a licensed professional geologist in several states, but I study mostly Precambrian stratigraphy. I do have several peer-reviewed papers out there. And so it's not impossible. You don't need a PhD to get a peer-reviewed paper through the process. You just have to be right, or close to it. Other than that, I don't know if there's that's pretty much it. I'm not whole good at the whole biography thing.
Well, that's okay. Did you have a particular question over something that I said?
No, it's nothing negative.
No, positive or anything that you maybe didn't understand.
I need to go back and look, and I need to read the paper in the link.
Yeah, if you can go through the talk origins, actually pretty well everything in the talk is in the talk origins essay that I wrote. And again, if there's anything unclear, or if you question it or disagree with, feel free to email me. I usually don't go online and look for trouble, I guess you'd say.
Some of us do.
I do not have the courage to Google my own name and seeing what's being said about me online. But certainly, if people email me, I do respond.
Well, I
Okay,
mean,
yeah.
I think that's almost a shame because your presentation was great. The fact that you have the ability to refute these things is golden. You know, a lot of people would love to have the expertise that you gentlemen have. So the fact that you come into these hangout, or you came into this one and the last one, and able to put forth your information, I cannot give you enough compliments on that, especially how well that I think you came across, and that you know, people that watch these videos will see the huge dichotomy between how you and Dr. Loechelt are putting forth information as opposed to someone like Dr. Humphreys, who I just we cannot get the information out of that we've requested. So I think you've done an exceptional job, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, thank you very much, Steve and Gary.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, you guys did a great job, but unfortunately, I was watching it. I didn't get the alert when it was live. I was watching it in my car, so I couldn't take down notes. So I'm gonna go now and go back and write some stuff down, and I'll send you that email.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that
Steve.
would be
Yeah,
great.
sorry for the notification issues. YouTube
That's
does
YouTube. I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't actually get one either. Otherwise, I would have actually watched it. But I came into the after hangout because of the subject matter, and I was wondering about Purple Dan because he would be a good addition.
I don't know why certain people don't get notifications. I've seen that happen before. We had about almost 60 people live, which is a fraction of what I expected. And I think because with the notification, when it does render, then they do get a notification. So they'll have to watch it after the fact. So it will be watched. But the live, I usually, we get about 100, 120 people watching live. That one was only 60. So I think there was a problem with YouTube's notification. Not unusual. It happens. But when after it uploads, there will be a notification that goes out to everybody that's subscribed to me, and they will get something in their email saying that I've uploaded a video. So, but it could take upwards of like an hour to render sometimes. But no, I think it's actually rendered because I just got a comment on it, if I'm not mistaken. So, but anyway, Steve, thanks a lot for joining us and putting your input in. That's just great. And Dave, did you want to add anything too, by the way?
No, I just came in to ask if Purple Dan was going to join. Actually, it was just more of a.
I'm not sure if I know who that is, to be honest with you.
Purple Dan, he does geology debunks, and sometimes he's in on rhetoric and discourses, flat Earth debunks, and things like
I
that.
know rhetoric and discourse. You know who we should got was what was her name? World War Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got a PhD in geology. She would have enjoyed this. But anyways, you guys want to kind of wrap this up? I think we've kind of gone over some of the stuff that we kind of missed in the other hangout. I appreciate the after show. I want to keep it to about an hour. If people have any questions later on, please message me, email me. If you don't want to message Dr. Henke directly or anything like that, I would be able to give the information. Yeah, Wildwood Claire, that's it. Thank you, Hannah. I understand in the live chat. She is awesome. Yeah. But I think that overall, I think we presented the arguments very well. You gentlemen presented the arguments very well. I'm looking forward immensely to hearing Dr. Humphrey's rebuttal on this, because he did say that he would. I'm going to take him at his word. And we were very cordial and polite to him, so I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. And I'm hoping it's more than just more of the same, like rhetoric. I want to see his data. I want to see what he puts forth as evidence to support his position, and then have both you gentlemen later on evaluate that. Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds very good.
So
Good with me.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you guys for watching in the live chat. I appreciate it very much. Like this video, please share this one and especially the other one on Twitter, G+, Reddit, Stumble Upon. Let's get it out there. I really do appreciate it. And I do appreciate all the people that have been Patreon to my channel. I'm trying to provide a lot more content this year, high quality content. So if you're a Patreon, I have a couple Patreons in here. I do appreciate it. Every dollar that you do go to my Patreon is very much appreciative, and I want to be able to give you guys some very high end quality stuff, and I have a lot of stuff planned this particular year. This Saturday I will be on Jackson Wheat's channel with Dr. PZ Myers and Scientist Mel, and I think a few other people. And I think we're going to be talking about science communication and some other things, and I'm really looking forward to that. And then on Sunday, we do have Ken Hovind with Dr. Herman Mays going to have a debate on common ancestry. However, We are pre-recording that, and we may not upload that until Monday on the Non Sequitur Show channel. So that's going to be an actual podcast rather than a G Plus Hangout on iTunes. So if you guys have any questions on this, by all means, like I said, this is not an easy topic. I don't expect anybody to digest this overnight. I'm hoping they go back, rewatch the video if need be, and look at the links in the video description and learn about this particular topic. And then if they have any questions, by all means, ask. And with that, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Henke and Dr. Loechelt, very much. I cannot thank you guys enough for providing your expertise on this topic, because I would never be able to do this alone. This was way out of my depths, but I find it to be a fascinating topic.
Well, you're welcome, and we'll see you all next week then.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't forget, next week, Friday, Dr. Loechelt, you want to really quick wrap it up and tell us what you're going to be doing last Friday, and I'll end this.
Yeah, so this was part one of a two-part series we had planned. So Kevin talked a lot about the errors made in various assumptions in the geology and in the dating equations, really just pointing out the flaws. One of the things I want to get into is the modeling next week, and in particular to show that if you do the modeling right, there is no inconsistency, that the helium content of the zircons and their 1.6 billion year age are totally consistent if you do it right.
That's gonna be the huge takeaway. If you
That's
do
the
it
punchline.
right, that's the punchline. And obviously, I think everybody agrees that you have. And I looked at your presentation. Again, beyond me, I'm getting there, but it's fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your model versus his model, because in the Great to Great community, that's what we talk about a lot, modeling, and we don't see a lot of accurate young Earth creationist models. Matter of fact, I've seen none. So the fact that you actually have a model that works, that's just perfect. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you for the live chat, and again, please like and share this video and subscribe if you have not. It is appreciated, and we'll see you guys next week. Actually, I'll see you guys on Friday.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Saturday. Tomorrow, yeah. I don't even know what day of the week it is right now. So thank you guys. Good night.